Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, July 20th, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello, feeling very alone right now.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Thanks, Mike.
It's
a podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in the comings going in the hockey world, and or sometime in the afternoon. You know, we're flexible. It's up to you guys, whatever works for you. But yeah, we are here today. I got my logo today on my thing. It's pretty I thought that was kind of cool. I'm just
I'm still waiting for my shirt. Come on.
Yeah. It just came yesterday, so you'll have it next week. Yeah, we're all set. And yeah, this is the podcast that with an out of focus background today, apparently on my thing. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, don't worry about that. Those shirts, they look just as out of focus to me right now as they do to you, because I am super tired, and we're going to make this show happen today. We're going to start off with or also, if you join us in the chat room on Hockey Buzz, I mean, if you go into YouTube, I guess it would be. And then
just go to the, if you're watching it on YouTube, if you're not watching it on the actual page on Hockey Buzz, right. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, the chat is there. You can just type in a question. We'll take it. Thomas Smith has already typed something in, so he was the first guy in the room. So, nice. And so Philip just asked the question. So put your questions in there. We'll go through a few of them.
We'll definitely do that, and we'll have some fun with it. Okay, because I'm going to go into there now as well, so I can see it. I can see it now, which is good. And yeah, we'll do go through this. And there's a good. Philip's got a good both good questions so far. So we'll get to them in just a second, I promise, because there's not a whole lot to talk about today. But let's start here with Jacob Trouba, whose hearing is tomorrow.
No, it's today.
It's today. I'm sorry. I guess I'm thinking that the response will be tomorrow. Man, my Wi-Fi sucks. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, the response if they have the hearing and there's no settlement, it'll happen within 48 hours of the hearing. But the hearing is, I believe, at some point today. I think it's this afternoon. And Elliot Friedman reported earlier this morning that there had not been any settlement, and usually we see a settlement like right before the hearing. So it sounds like they're actually going to go to the hearing. And if that's the case, then yeah, I mean the parameters that were reported were Winnipeg was offering $4 million and Trouba was asking $7 million.
Oh, that's $3 million between friends. Come on,
you could drive a Mack truck through that hole.
Yeah, right. I mean, what's it? That's really funny. Yeah, and the interesting thing there's a lot of interesting things about this. Okay, but the thing that I think we should start with is remember that this is the same situation that we have seen before in terms of here's a player who had said for years we knew he kind of didn't want to stay in Winnipeg. Then, of course, they had a great run this year, and he said, yeah, I kind of would like to stay in Winnipeg, which was great. And, but of course he still wants to make his money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But these arbitration cases, there's a couple reasons you don't want to go to arbitration. Like the first, obviously, it's never a situation that anyone's happy with because there's always something between the two, right? So it's always everybody's unhappy with it,
right?
Because the Jets are going to think they're paying too much. Trouba's going to think they got off with too little. You're going to have an issue, right? So and Trouba's probably going higher than he should, and Winnipeg's coming in lower than they should. So it's just an ugly situation. But more than that, it's the ugliness of things that are said during arbitration cases are really not good. They're not good for players to go through. Like agents are involved usually sometimes, but players are often in these cases themselves. And I don't know if Trouba's doing it or not, but I know quite often players are in there, and the things that are so he sees the team explaining why he's not worth it, and that's because that's what they have to do. Bad. It's just nothing good comes to that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the situation, and I actually wrote about this yesterday because, we know that there's going to be some sort of domino effect regarding Trouba and a few other of these guys who are going to salary arbitration. Even if they reach a settlement, even if he signs an extension, Winnipeg, Cheveldayoff is going to have to deal with certain things. But he's 2 years away from unrestricted free agency, and he took the bridge deal, and he was making a little less than $3 million. Tyler Myers' deal expires at the end of this year. Yeah. He's making $5.5 million, so he should get paid. Now, the problem here is, if he's wanting to sign, and I'm assuming he wants to sign any long-term deal is going to be 7 or 8 years, that's buying 5 to 6 years of unrestricted free agency. You're not going to get this guy for $4.5 million. He's going to be 6, 6.5, 6.75, something like that, something close to what Bufflin's making.
Yeah.
You may not want to pay him that because he's not a 50-point scoring defenseman. And that's
the thing about Trouba, because he's changed what he is, like over time, right? I mean, don't you agree with that? I mean, he has gone from, like, I remember, and it was maybe it was the number he wore, or that he liked to use. It was a Drew Doughty fan himself, but you always remember the Drew Doughty comparisons early in his career. We're always like, that's Trouba. That's Trouba's going to be Drew Doughty. And yet he's turned into more of a defensive defenseman, way more of a defensive defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfair to say he was going to turn into Drew Doughty.
I mean, the point at which everybody was saying that. I mean, that right. It probably was unfair, but that was sort of what the upside was.
Right, but remember the critics of Drew Doughty, and we know there are he's won a couple Stanley Cups and he's a Norris Trophy winner and he's one of the top 5 defensemen in the league. The critics of Doughty are the same critics that say Erik Karlsson is not a great defenseman in terms of his own zone. Doughty sometimes has his little foibles in his own zone. Trouba's more of a defensive defenseman, but he's a decent offensive player, but he's not a top offensive player. And I think that's where they run into trouble. They're basing their valuation on him being a point producer. Yeah. And I mean, he's not a strict shutdown guy. I think he's at the top, his top level. He's a 35 to 40 point defenseman who can play 25 to 27 minutes a night. Those guys don't grow on trees, but the whole problem with Winnipeg is it may not be the problem of valuing what Trouba is worth. It may be fitting everything else, because not only the guys
that's definitely the issue, right? There's so many players.
Right, and it's not only the guys, like they still have, they got Adam Lowry signed. They have Dano and Morrissey and Patan and a few other free agents this summer. Next summer, it's Wheeler UFA, Line A entry level up, and Kyle Connor entry level up. Where are you getting this money? That's the thing. It's like if they can't get Trouba on the long-term deal for the money that they want, they may be willing to take the 1-year deal and then deal with it next summer in terms of trading them off, because they simply can't afford it.
Yeah, and a 1-year deal, would be kind of horrible in some ways, because
it would just perpetuate the same problem.
It's been going on for years, and I thought that there was a lot of hope during the playoffs that we would just see Trouba as a Jet forever. Like, it really felt like that was heading that way. And but there's 2 teams that I wrote in my blog today that are very much paying attention to this, and Thomas Smith wrote something in the chat room too. He said that Trouba's an all-arounder, which is undervalued, which is very true. I mean, I agree. And also the other thing, and here's the thing about, I talked to a scout the other day before we get on to the teams that are interested, about what is an offensive defenseman, because that's an interesting question. Because really, when you think about it, I think that definition has changed as well, because there's different kinds of offensive defensemen. It used to be like it was obvious, like you had, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Kim Janssen on the Islanders, whatever, just like guys who were offensively, that's what they did. A good example.
I always refer to them as one zone.
Right, these are Stratomatic defensemen, right in my head. I think of Thomas Johnson.
Phil Housley early in his career, and for those who don't play Stratomatic, they give ratings for offense and defense and what they call breakaway penetration. Basically when you're trying to get on a breakaway or trying to get a scoring chance. Right. And a player whose overall rating is high, like, it was a scale of 1 through 4. If a guy was a 4 on offense and a 4 on defense, back in the day, that was that was Boria Salming, that was Larry Robinson, that was Potvin, that was
Brian Trottier. I think of players like that were just absolutely great offensively, great defensively. Ron Francis,
okay. Right? Whereas Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky and Brett Hull were all 4s offensively, top rated offensively, and 1s worst rated defensively, because their offense was their defense, them having the puck and going the other way. But in their own zone, they were not great.
Right, and you'd have guys like Luke Richardson, say a defenseman, who was like a 1-4 or a 2-4 that was defensively great, but didn't get a lot of shots off. Because actually, I talked to Stratomatic about how the ratings were derived, and the actual 4 offense rating was, we think of it as how good they were offensively. It really meant how many shots they took. That's what it came down to.
Yes.
So that means, of course, the player who takes more shots is going to be better offensively, but not necessarily. So there were some players who had who were 3 offenses but had great cards. We used to say,
right? Their shooting percentage was what determined the how good their shot was. But the thing is that if you use that calculation for a guy like Trouba, Trouba is maybe a 3 offense and a 4 or 5. Now the defensive ratings are up to 5 now. He may be a
5 now. Okay.
Yeah. Offense is the highest rating is 4, but defense the highest rating is 5. He is a 5 on defense, but he's probably a 3 on offense. Whereas Doughty is probably a 4-5.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think that and he's a 3 on, but he might even be like a high 2 on offense sometimes. He
takes shots. He takes enough shots.
Yes, you're right, but he doesn't score a lot of goals. So he's now. So when I got back to my question, there's a real sidetrack, but fun. When I got back to my question with the scout, I'm like, what is an offensive defenseman? Is it a guy who runs the power play, who is all offense, like a 4-1? Is it that kind of guy? Or in the new NHL, what's more important? Is that more important? And he said, no, the real thing that we look for, well, what we consider offensive defensemen are guys who have a good first outlet pass. He said that was the most important thing to him. That a guy gets the puck and sets the play in motion the other direction. Doesn't mean he's going to get up in the play and score. It means that he's going to quickly transition, grid transitional defense, which Trouba is very good at. Okay, so that's where you have Trouba. So you sit there and you say Trouba's not going to score goals, but he is really good first pass defenseman, right? So that is and there he's every bit, and Doughty is great at that. Doughty is probably one of the best in the NHL at that. And there are some players I could think for example, take the Flyers, Gostisbehere. He's a great offensive defenseman, but I wouldn't say he's great at the first pass. I think that's actually one of his weaknesses. And sometimes because he tries to stick handle a little too much and gets himself caught, right? So that's sort of how you look at it. So the 2 teams that I've heard, so when we talk about offensive defenseman, I just think I keep changing my thought, but when we think about offensive defenseman, I think I've been trying to write a blog about this for a while, so I'm kind of talking out in my head with you guys, but what is an offensive defenseman? I think there's several different kinds.
I think Mike Green is. I mean, Mike Green is an offensive defenseman, but
he's a classic offensive defenseman.
Yes,
right. But that to me is an interesting thing. So you wonder how that plays out. So Trouba is good as far he's a good. Maybe we should make it. We have defensive defenseman, offensive defenseman, and transitional defenseman, or something like that. I was trying to find another word.
Right.
But because Trouba is a great transitional defenseman, he'll steal the puck away and set it the other direction. That's actually what Vegas had a lot of. That those defensemen aren't great offensively, great defensively, but they were really good transitional defensemen, and that was the key. So McNabb turned out to be a great transitional defenseman.
But Trouba also has something that is a diminishing quality amongst NHL defensemen right now is he's physical. He hits.
Right, which is usually important, especially. And don't think for a second that teams didn't realize that the way Vegas was knocked out, people believe it was because of the physicality of Washington. They really do. And I don't know that that's altogether true, but I think that it definitely played into it. I mean, watching those games a lot, I think you see the physical things when you're live more than you do even on TV. And watching it live, I did see the fact that Carlson, some of the other guys were slower through the neutral zone because they were aware of the attack of what was there. That and the thing that made Vegas so good all year was they had only one speed, and it was full out all together speed. So when they slowed down in neutral zone, they became very normal team. They became nothing spectacular, and you really saw it with Carlson.
And we're no longer in the days, and every time I see a team trying to intimidate another team or hit their better players, I hearken back to 1993 during that famous LA Toronto series when Marty McSorley took a run at Doug Gilmour and Wendell Clark had to, drop the gloves and fight him. And Clark apparently went past the LA bench and said to Wayne Gretzky, "You keep hitting Gilmour and you're next."
Yeah.
And that stopped the LA Kings from running Gilmour because Gretzky would have been a corpse.
Because it's the truth. I mean, because guys who have that incredible speed and incredible skill, you can't stop them by normal methods. You have to and that's what makes guys like Malkin so impossible, right? Because Malkin he's got all that skill, but you really can't stop him by hitting him. And that's why.
He's a freight train.
Oh, he's incredible. And when Malkin came in, I saw Malkin's first game in the NHL. I drove to Pittsburgh to see it because I'd heard so much about him. I really wanted to, and I went there, and immediately I got the sense that this guy he was special. At that time, I was like, this guy is just insane. Like, he has the passing ability of like an Adamo. It's like his passes were right on top. He had this crazy shot that was just crazy accurate, and he could plow through players at just like an Eric Lindros did. And it was just, to me, this was like the complete package for the first time maybe since Lindros, and Malkin was just nuts. And I think that Malkin's actual weakness, if anything else, has been the fact that he doesn't do that enough. Like, he doesn't just drive to the net, because if he drove to the net, he's gonna either get a goal or get a great chance in goal or draw a penalty. That's just you can't do anything about it.
Right.
So I think players sometimes feel weird doing that all the time, but he could. I mean, obviously. So when we're looking at physicality, that plays into Trouba's physicality is usually important. Now, the two teams that have mostly interested in him have been the same two teams from the very beginning of time that have been interested in him, which are the Detroit Red Wings and the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're the two teams that have always shown up. Trouba grew up in the Detroit area. Remember, that's his hometown team. They've always loved him there. They wanted to draft him. They really did. This is a team that, I mean, Detroit would love and Jacob Trouba right now would fit so well on that team. Obviously, they're a building team. They're going. Would he want to play at home? We've heard a lot of talk that he does want to play in America, in the United States at least. That was
that he does want to play in the U.S.
That he'd rather play in the U.S. That was what we were hearing about a year ago this time, maybe.
Right.
I don't know how much that's changed or whatever. I sure wouldn't want to play in the U.S. right now if I was a player, but I think that there's different things that or I would, but I'm just kidding around. But I think that when you look at the way this plays out, Detroit, Toronto is obviously the difference. Is Detroit's a U.S. team. Toronto's another Canadian team. But Toronto has, he fits into Toronto like he is what, if you went to see a witch doctor and said, design us the player we need for our team, they would design Jacob Trouba.
I mean, in Detroit, he would be part of the solution, but we know that Detroit, in spite of the moves that they've made this offseason that we talked about with Kevin yesterday, Bernier, Vanek, re-signing Mike Green, they're a rebuilding team. Zetterberg is going to leave. The core of that team is going to be Mantha and Larkin and Zadina. I mean, it's going to take them a couple years to make that transition, and he's young enough to be, a leader of that. But with Toronto, if you add Trouba without significantly affecting the core group, I mean, they're not going to trade Nylander for Trouba. That's just not a deal that they're going to do. But if they can add Trouba with giving Winnipeg a package of young players that are retainable and cheap, which is probably what they need right now. I mean, he's the physicality that they don't have. He's the top pairing right-handed D or right side D that they don't have to play with Morgan Riley. He's the missing piece. I think if they add him, let's just say this: if Tampa gets Carlson and the Leafs got Trouba, I would think that the Leafs had moved back ahead of Tampa. But
I would think at that point the NHL has to change the playoff format, because then you're gonna have it's so funny. I mean, obviously you can't do that for just a situation, but you'll have those two teams playing each other in the second round, right? So and that's just they would probably be.
If there's anything to what Kevin was saying yesterday about reseeding, I mean, having the playoff form, playing the they have the top three in the Atlantic, the top three in the Metro, and 2 wild cards. But then instead of having it the way it was last year, we had 3 100-point teams in the Atlantic, and 2 of them were out by the second at the end of the second round. Just rank them 1 through 8 in terms of points.
Yeah.
Why not? That's
a really good point. That'd really be fun. I wanted to. This is funny. I wanted to kind of go off topic for a second, because that is, I think, Trouba in a nutshell. I think we are where we are with that, and what we're going to see now before we finish up the Trouba thing. Yeah. As you can tell, my brain's scattered. I was talking to people all morning today. I updated the entire rumor chart yesterday of 20 players. I'm updating more and more as it goes today. So my brain is mush. Like I was about to. So I'm trying to keep my thoughts together. But let me start with this. Okay, let's finish up on the Trouba thing. So the Trouba thing, we're going to go through this. Now, it doesn't mean they're still not going to come up with a deal, because sometimes they do. Sometimes it can, until that ruling is decided, or even after the ruling is decided, they can still come up with a deal. But
Before the arbitrator comes out with the decision, yes.
Right. Once he makes a decision,
then it's it. That's it.
Right. They can't usurp it.
No.
Right. So until the arbitrator's decision comes down. So that gives them, 24, 48 hours afterwards? I forget.
48 hours.
48 hours. So you're looking at sometime on Sunday, right? Because they're having the meeting right now. So sometime on Sunday, we'll know a lot. So this is a big weekend to keep checking back. And on Sunday, I'll
and this is the thing I wrote yesterday. One way or the other, there is a cause and effect. If Trouba signs the 1 year, if Trouba signs a 2-year deal, then basically he's a lame duck. He's going to free agency, and then it's a question of when Winnipeg decides to trade him, because he more than likely, a guy who's going to go 2 years to free agency is going to go to free agency. More than likely, if they settle, it's a 1-year deal. And then the whole situation happens again next summer. If they sign the long-term extension and he's making over $6 million, then you could see them trade Tyler Myers, because, right now they opened up cap space with Enstrom leaving. That was almost $6 million. Myers is making, I think, 5.5 or 5.75. If they're paying Trouba like an increase of $3 million, I don't know where they get that room with all the other guys they have to sign. So there's a cause and effect either way. And just like with Trouba, the same goes with Matthew Dumba in Minnesota. They sign him to a long-term deal, then they're probably gonna have to trade Spurgeon at some point during the year.
And Spurgeon's a tough one, because you talk to people in Minnesota, they're kind of all over the map with him. As far as what they really see of him in terms of, I've heard players who say he's just, or people, or, sources I trust that say he's a complete battler, he battles for everything. Some who say he's overrated, some who say he's not quite at the right speed for the NHL.
Right. Well, they have time on him because the Ryan Suter injury buys them time. They're probably going to put Suter on LTIR at the beginning of the season if he's not ready, and he's not supposed to be ready. So that buys them a little time. But once he's healthy, then his $7.8 million cap hit comes back on, and I don't think you're going to have the room. So they may have to act preemptively on that.
I would think they'd have to act preemptively on that. So so we've got a lot of these things, a lot of these arbitration cases happening now. It feels like there's some that are kind of, another player that isn't signed yet, is not arbitration eligible, I don't think, is Tom Wilson, right?
Yeah, he's arbitration eligible.
He is arbitration eligible, so he's going to arbitration too. All right, I apologize. So he's definitely. There's been a lot of talk about him over the last couple of days.
Yeah.
And what do you think? I mean, I think. The Caps. I mean, he's got. I mean, there's no question that Tom Wilson could not be in a better position, right? There he was, because he.
Well, a couple of days ago, when we had Anthony and Peter on the show, we did our little game, and the Wilson was one of the names that came up, and pretty much everybody was agreed that it would be, say, a 4 or 5 year contract at around $4.5 to $5 million, because
$5's a lot.
Yeah, the concern is, though, and I think Anthony brought this up, and I think he's dead on, is the fact that Wilson he's a bull in a china shop. He had that kind of effect on the Stanley Cup final last year, but the concern is that he's the type of forward like Milan Lucic that when he loses his speed, he loses his effectiveness. And Lucic, I think, is a better offensive player than Wilson. And once Wilson loses a step, which he might in a couple of years, power forwards tend to do it earlier than skilled guys, then you're paying $4.5 million to a third, fourth liner, and that you can't do.
Yeah, you definitely can't do that.
So they'll keep the term short on that, but I think because he was so valuable to their cup victory, he's going to get probably, I'd say in the high fours. I'd say 4.75 or 4.8 or 4.9. Something
interesting
like that.
That Kevin yesterday said he was worried about the Washington Capitals, in terms of like a fallback a little bit, like and that I mean, obviously the coach is changing. I don't think that's you never know how much of a big deal that is, right? But. I love Barry Trotz, but I still, even then, I wonder 10%, 20% what a coach is really too. But what do you think? I mean,
I think the thing you have to worry about, and with some other teams, it's not as much of a problem. But it was such a hurdle. It was such an ordeal to get to where they got and finally do it. You could categorize it under Stanley Cup hangover, but.
If anyone's going to have a Stanley Cup hangover, it's going to be Ovechkin.
But
I mean, he has proven that beyond doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
He's going to come to camp about 40 pounds overweight. But no, there was just this angst and this motivation to win because of all the stuff that they had gone through. And now that that's gone, I mean, sometimes teams, once that weight is off their shoulders, then they will continue to play at a championship level. Some other ones, they win and they're like, we won. Okay. And that's a one-shot deal. So, I mean, it's possible that, there's not as much fire in the belly of Ovechkin and Backstrom and Holtby and other guys.
It is always possible, but then there's also the thing of sometimes there is the other thing that sometimes when you've learned to win it, you learn to win it. Like I could see Ovechkin doing it again. I really could. I think that there's going to be lots of people that do predict they'll do it again. I bet you that when the preseason predictions come out, I'll bet you like a good 20% are saying that the Caps are going to win again.
Well, I mean, I know the odd, like Bovada's odds after the playoffs, when they came out with the odds for who was going to win the Stanley Cup, the Capitals were, I mean, they think they were like 14-1. They were like 5th or 6th. They weren't.
That's pretty shocking.
Yeah. No. Well, no. I think.
You know what that is. You're right. It's odds. We have to remember what odds are all the time. It's like odds are to get people to bet on it, right? So they're like Vegas is seeing that as a sucker bet. Vegas is seeing that as that you're not going to that people, if they put 14-1 on the ex Stanley Cup champions, people are just going to bet it, but they don't think that the winning again is going to happen.
Right, and Tampa was the best odds. I think it was like 7-1 or 5-1 or something like that. Yeah. And then when Toronto signed Tavares, I think they shot to the top. But then again, if Tampa gets Carlson, then they're going to be the favored one again. And
there's naturally going to be more people betting on Toronto to win than Tampa or Washington combined. So it's like.
Right.
Now it's interesting. Matt in the chat room says something about the Wilson thing I want to bring up. And then we're doing some chat room questions after that. Matt says, and I'm gonna have to plug in my computer 1 second. I just realized my thing's not plugged in. All right, so Matt says this. He says Wilson's making above 4 is atrocious. He says a great character guy, but come on, that would make him the next Ryan Clough, who was also a great character guy. I don't think
Ryan Clough got hurt.
I don't think they're comparable.
Yeah, no, and Ryan Clough before he got hurt was a scorer in the mid. I don't think that Tom Wilson is going to be a 20-goal scorer.
No, Batch Out says right there that Clough could get 25 goals, and which is true. That's a difference.
Yeah, when he was healthy, he was a very good forward with San Jose.
Now Wilson though has also shown moments that, and before this season when he really became physical.
He's grown offensively. There's no doubt. Do I think he's going to be like a 30-goal scorer? David Clarkson scored 30 goals once. It doesn't mean that he was a 30-goal scorer. Could he have a season where he does that? Sure.
Clarkson's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah, and of course,
Clarkson signed a ridiculous contract, right?
Right, but I see that's the thing. I don't think McClellan is going to sign Tom Wilson to a 7-year deal. I think it's going to be a shorter term. I think he'll get security, maybe 4, maybe 5 years. I don't think it's going to be 6, 7, or 8. I seriously doubt it.
Right. All right. So let's answer some questions here. So the first, first is from Philip DeHaven. And by the way, the chat room can be found if you go to YouTube. We do love it when you watch this in my blog, I have to admit, because we're trying to pay for it, but it helps when you're watching the blog. But you can watch this on YouTube, right? Click through it. And then there's a chat room on the right side. We'd love for people to participate in that because we interact. Usually Russ kind of keeps a tab on it best he can while we try to run the show. But today Russ is not here, so we're all kind of all in this together. So Philip DeHaven, hey Eck, can you talk as to why the Devils would be interested in Steve Mason? Don't see how that makes sense for him. Okay, that's a good question. I knew this would come up because I wrote today that Steve Mason had 3 teams that were looking at him. Vancouver was the most likely, but I'd also heard Chicago and New Jersey. I personally think Chicago makes the most sense for Steve Mason. I think Chicago is a great fit for him because I think they need that solid backup behind Crawford that's really going to do it for them.
Okay. It only makes sense if they're still concerned about Crawford's injuries.
But you have to be.
Because they do have Cam Ward.
They have Cam Ward, I know. And I'm not dissing Cam Ward or anything like that. But if Crawford goes down for a long period of time,
Right.
and you're Chicago, who is obviously gearing up for something. They're gonna make a big deal still. They're still gonna make a big move. They believe that last year was just a hiccup. They're gonna be right back in it. Right. So if you're them, if Crawford goes down for an extended period of time, which he has done in his career several times,
right,
you can't throw everything on Cam Ward. And Steve Mason to me is a great, I know it seems like overkill, but it also gives you a chance to play around with things a little bit. Should you want to make a trade somewhere in there too? So it gives you another option. I think, but why New Jersey is the question? Because New Jersey obviously has, right now, 2 goalies. Schneider's injuries. He's not even going to be ready for the beginning of the regular season, from what I've heard. Corey Schneider, he's not going to be back yet. It might not be very much longer after that, but he's still not going to be back. And as well as the backup Kincaid did in there, and he did incredibly well. The question is, you need a stabilizing force behind a young team like that, and that is what Mason does really well. And remember, okay, so the GM Shearer there was a GM in Pittsburgh and saw plenty of Mason as a flyer and saw what Mason played really well, against the Penguins, and had moments when, because Mason has the ability to get hot and to stay hot, and the ability to calm down a defense by being by playing a very solid way, which is not too different, than what you see with Marc-Andre Fleury. So he's not Marc-Andre Fleury, but remember, if we called New Jersey, like I did yesterday, the Vegas of the East, which I do think they are, I think they have the potential to surprise everybody in a huge way, because they have the speed and they have the young players. They need to have solid goaltending, and Schneider could be that guy, and he's always shown he could be that guy. But Kincaid could be that guy. But at the end of the day, Mason is going to sign somewhere, and he's going to go somewhere where he sees a chance to play for sure.
And see that's the thing with 2 of these scenarios, unless Schneider is out, unless New Jersey's not telling us something that they already know that Schneider is going to be out longer.
We're already saying he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season.
Right, but but they do have other goaltending. They re-signed Eddie Lack on a 1-year deal, basically because they knew Schneider was going to be out. Now, if they don't have confidence in Eddie Lack, they shouldn't have signed him. And if they're going to go and re-sign or go and sign Mason as a disaster backup, then something more has happened in between then and now to contribute to that. The same thing with Chicago. If Crawford is going to be out at the beginning of the season, then maybe adding Mason makes a little bit of sense. And then it could be a situation like a Mike Condon where he gets traded after after he comes in and subs in for the injured goaltender. He goes someplace else. Vancouver's probably the only one that I think he would actually get playing time, because their goaltending is not even average at best with Markstrom and with Anders Nielsen, but they have a young goalie in Thatcher Demko that is almost on the precipice of being ready. So I don't know whether you want to, and this is not a team that's a playoff team. So again, it's like, do you want to stack up 3
They were a playoff team.
Vancouver?
Oh, sorry.
No, Vancouver is not to my mind, it's not a playoff.
I thought you were still talking New Jersey. I got lost.
New Jersey is a playoff team, and if Schneider is out for the first 2 months of the year, then it makes sense. But Vancouver, they're a rebuilding team, and adding another veteran goaltender when you have a young goaltender you're probably going to call up sometime during the year, that doesn't add up. But I'm surprised at where's St. Louis.
Right.
I mean, they signed Chad Johnson. You had Jake Allen and Chad Johnson. That knocks your.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, the one thing I will say, and I'll say this a bunch of times, is that, St. Louis tends to just not put enough emphasis on this kind of thing. And I don't see everybody. They're always like, oh, the goaltending will be fine, and it never is. And it's the strangest thing. Because if you don't learn from history, you're destined to repeat it. I mean, that's what they're destined to repeat it, And as you watch it further and further along, it just continues on. I think that Mason. The thing about Mason has always been he's at his best when he's playing every day. That's for sure.
Yes.
And there's no question about that. That was the issue with when they signed him in Winnipeg, and they were gonna split him between. And that could. And now I'm telling you that they should sign as the third goalie. So I understand the questions for this.
Yeah,
for sure. But these are just the things I've heard mentioned. So I'm not saying that
he might be better off. He might be better off waiting.
He probably will. I mean, chances are he will wait for a while because.
And if an injury comes up, like I'm not wishing ill on anybody, but say
Lundqvist goes down, for example.
Say Lundqvist goes down. Well, I mean, see, the thing is with the Rangers, they're in a rebuild right now. So if that's the case, they would just play whatever goaltending they have.
I don't know. Maybe Russ isn't here, but I think the Rangers are never in a rebuild like that. I think they would do something.
But a team like Florida has already planned for that eventuality. If Luongo goes down, they brought in Hutchinson, so they'd have Reimer and Hutchinson as their goaltending tandem. But if there was a team out there, that has a number one goaltender
goes down,
yeah.
I mean, Mason has the ability to be a great goalie. I think he's way better than the question. I mean, I know in Philadelphia here, people are saying, if you could have Brian Elliott or Steve Mason right now, who would you want? Going into the season, and there's a lot of people that lean towards Steve Mason. In that, if you ask that question,
I think he's a quality goaltender. I'm just saying, I think that his reputation is what you've just said, is that he's better as a number one, getting consistent playing time. And if he waits into the season, stays in shape, maybe I don't know if he's desperate. He wouldn't go down to the American Hockey League and play on a PTO or something like that to stay in shape. He'd just stay a free agent. But if then an injury happens, then he's ready to jump in. Then that would be a great Band-Aid for some team on a long-term solution. But that, you're rolling the dice there if you're Mason. I mean, you're getting the buyout money, so I guess you're not hurting, but you want to play. You're not an old goaltender. You're still pretty good. Yeah.
No, that's true. Let's see if we have any other questions you guys throw into the chat room here.
Timothy Park was asking, where is Toby Enstrom going to sign?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm bringing my notes. I have a whole bunch of notes on him. I was talking about him today. 1 second.
Now, the thing is, Peter has said many a time on the show, there was some falling out there in Winnipeg between Enstrom and Maurice, where he wasn't getting playing time at the end of his contract. There was some injury questions there, but he's not. I mean, I believe he's 33. He's not overly old, so there's still something left in the tank there. Left-hand shot. I think, we play that game where a player around this time, we ask whether they're going to sign a 1-year contract, a PTO, or they're not going to get an offer. I think he's getting a 1-year contract somewhere. As for where, I don't know. But
I will throw another. And so the 4 teams I have actually. I have Toronto, which I know he's a left-handed shot, and everyone's going to say, oh, he's a left-handed shot, because whenever you bring up a left-handed defenseman with Toronto, but he is an experienced defenseman, and that doesn't hurt to have around. But they're not the top team I have. I have Chicago again. This is another Chicago situation. So I have Chicago in this one. Actually, as the favorite right now is Chicago, Buffalo as well, and Carolina. So those are the 4 teams I've heard. I'm kind of a little bit surprised that the Island, and I've been trying to get the Islander to get somebody to tell me that the Islanders are interested in him, and they haven't been able to get there. So I haven't been able to put the Islanders up. I mean, Enstrom and Emelin are sort of in the same boat to me. Like, Alexei Emelin's another one.
Although Enstrom has more of an offensive upside. Emelin is, to my mind, is a pure bottom pairing guy.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether teams that are established want to bring in that random element. I mean, Emelin is a rat on the ice. I've
heard about Montreal having interest in bringing him back.
Right. Which that makes sense.
Yeah. And he would be a great fit for them, I think. Although on my chart right now, I have 40% to Montreal, 10% to the Islanders, 10% to Buffalo, and then I have the other 40% to the KHL. So, I mean, that to me is, I think that Emelin is quite likely to sign in the KHL before too long here. But he wants to play in NHL. He was good last year for Nashville. I mean, he was very. The thing about Emelin is he doesn't hurt you. You can put him out there. He's not going to hurt you defensively.
Well, remember the KHL is training camp starts in August.
I know.
So it's gonna happen pretty soon if he's going to the KHL. Julian in the chat offered a pretty good observation here. How about Mason to Pittsburgh? Because their number 2 is Tristan Jerry, who played pretty well last year in a small window. But do you really want Jerry to be a backup and play 15 to 20 games behind Matt Murray, or do you want him playing full time in the AHL when he's so young? The thing is, though, again, Mason is better as a number 1 than a backup, and he's never going to be a number 1 in Pittsburgh. But that might be there are plenty of backups out there and the thing is, I think there are plenty of backups out there that are better at being a backup than Mason it would be.
It depends on the situation of the team, right? It depends. Like there's 2 kinds of teams that you look to Mason on. Either you're really close, like Pittsburgh. That's a good example. Pittsburgh is, definitely one of the 10 teams that could win the Stanley Cup, if you want to say 10 teams. Pittsburgh's one of them. Pittsburgh's maybe one of the 5 teams to win the Stanley Cup, right? So they're that good. And that makes sense because last year when their goalie went down, it was a problem. And we've seen, Murray's had injury issues. That's a problem. So maybe that could happen. Or if you're a team that just needs a solid goalie because your defense is young. And that to me is the other situation that Mason's in. So those are the 2. There's a lot of teams in the middle there. So you're really talking about like maybe 5 to 10 teams at the top, maybe 5 teams at the bottom.
Because remember, the teams that are rebuilding or the teams that have a young team, like say for example Buffalo, and they got Allmark and Carter Hutton, and on the surface you would say, oh, they could use Mason. They want to win if their young players are good, but if there's some growing pains and stuff like that, it's been more beneficial for them to go with their own internal goaltenders and finish in the bottom 10 and get another high draft pick and build some experience. Some teams don't want to win those 5 or 6 extra games that a good backup goaltender will give them. That's the difference between picking 3rd and picking 10th.
Yeah, it's huge. I like the Pittsburgh idea. I'll look into it a little bit to see if there's any. I don't know that. The one thing I would say about Mason that is a problem, and the teams, if they do their homework, they'll realize this, is he has not the greatest attitude. Backups need a certain kind of attitude for sure. He definitely has had issues in Philly throwing his defense under the bus kind of in different situations, like where he would be upset about the way they were playing, the way the team was playing. It didn't. But at the same time, he's a very strong guy. He's been through a lot. He had terrible things happen while he was in Philly, and he played through it. He's got a lot of mental toughness, but he definitely his competitiveness can get the better of him sometimes. And you'll see him say some stuff, and that doesn't always necessarily matter. But some teams, I could see that mattering in Pittsburgh's room. And I could see that mattering in certain rooms. It mattered in Philly's room a little bit towards the end, and I think that's one of the reasons they went for Elliott, who's a very, very much the opposite of that. Like Elliott's great to his teammates, everybody loves him type thing. Different kind of situation.
Now, Thomas Smith in the chat here says Ottawa seems to be holding firm on moving Bobby Ryan's contract in any deal for Karlsson. So wouldn't the Lightning or the Sharks be better off just to sign Karlsson as a free agent next year? Yes.
And Kevin Allen, who he's very connected. The thing about Kevin, when you have him on, is always kind of funny, and I've said this before, but he writes for USA Today, where he really can't talk too much about rumors that are happening because the USA Today doesn't really, they don't really like that too much. So he'll write speculatively, but he did throw something out here as a sidebar yesterday. It was really interesting, where he heard that Tampa's game the whole time has been to sign him next year. That they never made. He said they never really made an offer that they thought they would seriously take. The offers were terrible, and they knew Ottawa wouldn't take it. But they figured, we'll make a terrible offer to get him for one more year and maybe be able to sign him for 8. But if we're not going to take our terrible offer, then forget it. And I think that's Tampa's game. I think that's where it's at right now.
And now Dorian is put in the position of fielding the best 1-year offer. It's not rental until the trade deadline, but now he's got to go back to, nobody, Karlsson is not going to sign an 8-year extension with anybody he's traded to other than supposedly Tampa. And if Tampa is going to lowball, then basically he trades him someplace else other than Tampa and gets the best return he possibly can, or he holds him to the deadline and trades him as a rental if that price will be better, which it might be. Imagine you're at the trade deadline You have a $6.5 million Carlson, and you have the Toronto Maple Leafs with $14 million in cap space.
Yeah.
And they're one defenseman away from winning the Stanley Cup. Now, first of all, are you going to be stupid enough to not trade with the Leafs because that's the team that your fan base hates?
And the funny thing is, like, that the word around the league is constantly has been like that is. I mean, I've heard Montreal mention too that they wouldn't trade to Montreal, but mainly but Montreal doesn't have any interest. Where this situation really in Toronto, they do have interest, and this is something that they said they won't do. You wonder if they would do like a 3-way deal that would like change things that would get them there somehow.
It might, but the thing is, though, if any deal that would be made at the deadline with Ottawa would be with a team that you could perceive as, renting them for a Stanley Cup run. If you trade him to, a team that's a non-contender, then Dorian's going to smell it out that it's a 3-way deal. I mean, he can't stop it. He can't make the GM promise. He couldn't make Doug Wilson promise that he wasn't going to trade Mike Hoffman to Florida. So
along those lines, something kind of interesting is going on with the Hoffman deal. We mentioned this too, and then I want to get back to this. But Hoffman's wife has filed this special thing in Canada that you can file to have.
Basically, to reveal the information of the proof, which
sounds like that she believes that information. Obviously, she wouldn't do that if it was going to incriminate her. So she must think that wouldn't it be? How fascinating would it be if that poor woman had nothing to do with this? Like, if that would be something that would be. I mean, we've all assumed it. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're still friends. I mean, I think what's going on here is obviously there was stuff said in the past that was bad. The two women don't like each other. All that stuff's fine, but to say the stuff that she was accused with that was really horrible things. What if that wasn't her?
Anything's possible. I mean, yes. I mean, if she's innocent and she's trying, and apparently under Canadian law, you can request this information that because they had to base this order of restraint on some evidence.
Right.
For them to refute that, they need to know what that evidence is. So, I'll be very interested to see how it unfolds, because it's sort of a very ugly and just sort of
I think it's fascinating. I really do. So anyway, the last thing I'll say is the pressure on the Ottawa's GM right now is intense, obviously. But beyond intense. In terms that I've heard, it's like his job is depending on how this plays out. So you're sitting there,
and it's not only Carlson.
Not only Carlson, not at all. It's the fact
and Anderson
and
Ryan,
and the fact you have this first round pick you trade away next year. Like, there's a bunch of things that are piling up on him. So he's got to make his situation is just not enviable. Like, you've got a really bad spot there all around. He's got to make a lot of tough decisions here.
And the funny thing is that the draft pick with Colorado that Colorado is getting, that could be the factor that tips this from it being a summer deal to a deadline deal. Because if the offers are not significantly better than what you think you will get for Carlson at the deadline, then you basically have an own rental situation with Carlson for 60 games to prevent you from being at the bottom of the league and giving Colorado a top 5 pick.
Right.
Yeah. And then you still get your payoff at the end of it by trading them. But yeah, it's somebody was saying, why not make a run for Carlson now if you're the Leafs? Because I don't think it's the same situation with the Manny Machado thing in Major League Baseball. The Phillies were interested in him, but he's more than likely going to go to the Phillies next fall or next winter. Right. But why would you give up 3 of your best prospects in your organization for a guy that you may be getting for nothing?
I'll believe that when I see it. By the way, if
you're right, but I'm saying even for teams like the Yankees or other teams that are
a long time over here. So I don't know.
I get it.
No, but that's someone asked, will Panarin be re-signed? We talked a little bit about that yesterday. Troy Lombard asked that question. By the way, we're getting these questions from the chat room, which is on the YouTube page right next to the thing. So go check it out. And what's kind of cool about it too is it actually, if you watch the YouTube later, it replays in real time on the side, which is kind of fun. So you can see what's going on. And we really appreciate you guys being in there. We appreciate you all watching, but definitely get in the chat room if you're watching, because it's fun. All right, so Troy Lombardi asked, will Panarin be re-signed? I think the chances of that are like 10%. I read that, and I was the opposite on that not too long ago. I actually started writing a story about why this was being blown out of proportion. Why, like, okay, Panarin's going to be fine. Ottawa, he doesn't have that much trouble with Ottawa. I started going down this line because I was talking to some people who said, yeah, this is just typical situation, not Ottawa, Columbus, but typical situation where Columbus is getting bad mouth because it's Columbus, and and Panarin, it has to be, of course, in a bigger hockey city. And so I did research. I talked to people involved, and the more people I talked to, the more it was just leading me down the same direction. That no, that he wants to be someplace else, and that this is a situation where now he is. Funny, his agent is coming out and saying things like, he's not going to. There's a deadline when training camp starts. He's not going to talk about anything after that, which is true, of course. But I've seen that not happen too, because if suddenly if he's not going to have a communication, but his agent still will talk to them. His agent will still have discussions with the team. And if the team came back with like $12 million a year for 8 years, they might talk again. So, but that's not going to happen right now.
Right.
So Panarin is going to go someplace else, which is going to be a really tough spot for them, for sure.
And Matt Borkowski in the chat says, asks about the Devils as an option for Panarin that they haven't been mentioned. And I'm like, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they're, I think they have a ton of cap space and they have a young core, and the addition of Panarin as a big score that would add up. But it's all a question of a team trading for him and knowing whether they have the chance of signing him. It's again, using another sport as an example, it's a Kawhi Leonard situation. The Raptors trade for Kawhi Leonard. He's got 1 year left in his contract. If the Devils traded for Panarin, is Panarin just going to play out the 1 year and then go in free agency and go wherever he wants? If that's the case, the Devils are not going to make the deal, because why would they waste young assets to get him when they can't hold on to him for 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, now, in the chat room, I haven't heard this, Christopher, we just put up there that Panarin's agent said he wants to go to Philadelphia or New York. I haven't heard that, I don't think Columbus wants to trade him to Philadelphia or New York. I mean, that's like definitely, trading within the division, at least as of now, until there's realignment. But they're trading within the division right now, so that's
the last place they want to trade him.
Yeah, you don't want to trade him to the Rangers
in their own division,
or the Flyers or the Penguins or something like that. I mean, they would like to get him out west. That's why I threw out San Jose yesterday as an option, because San Jose feels like an option for Panarin. It really does.
I'm not wrong. The Carter deal and the other big deal that the Flyers and the Blue Jackets made were when the Blue Jackets were in the Western Conference, correct?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Carter deal turned out to be horrendous for them.
Yes.
Because Carter was a jerk and wouldn't play there. I mean, wouldn't play hard there, at least. It's still one of my told the story too many times. I want to tell it, but Carter going to Columbus was a disaster. Flyers got Couturier and Voracek, which is insane. And then they traded Carter to LA, and I guess they got
Matt Fratton in a second round pick. It was something like that.
That's not how they got Jack Johnson.
I'd have
Johnson came through.
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it. So I know. So lastly, but not leastly, there's two things I wanted to bring up. One is I'm bringing this up to Mike too, because he's never heard this idea, but I had an idea and I wanted to throw it off you guys. Just while we're in the chat room and see what you guys think of it. It dawned on me the other day, it would be fun in the summer on Fridays to do something a little different, and call it like Flashback Fridays. And what we would do is we would pick famous moments in hockey history, and Mike Bress and I would come on as if it happened last night. We would come on and do the show. Like this could be the no goal in Buffalo or what things.
Bob Nystrom's overtime goal.
Right. Mike and I the three of us would watch the game ahead of time. We would get ourselves back in the frame of mind, maybe dress like we would dress back in the 80s, and come on the air and just do a show like that. Just in the terms of of what it would be, of historical in historical time and what the repercussions could be. I think that got to be kind of fun.
That is possibilities. I mean, if you want me to come on air and say the F word about 5,000 times, we can redo Game 7 of the Kings and the Leafs.
Right, that's like one of them that I think people would love to see, Mike. I'd love to see like your reaction if you're a reporter covering that game, what it would have been the next day.
Well,
I
would harken back to me in my early 20s when I was watching that game, and something got broken in the house. Let's just say that.
Well, and this is me with the 1980 Islanders goal.
Yes.
Islanders Cup win with the offsides and the high stick goal and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was in the same boat. So that's something. If you guys like that idea, let us know in the chat room. Let us know, or put in the chat in the comments in this
yes.
blog, because we read the comments all the time, and it would be nice to know. I just think it'd be something different to do because, if Carlson is just going to go into the season and not going to resign, we can't talk about Carlson every day. We do want to do a podcast on the 1992-93 season, as someone had suggested earlier, that we would that would just be called HockeyBuzzcast 1992 to 1993. I'm just kidding. We do talk about that a lot, but that was a crazy season.
And no, in the chat, Fash out in the chat. It was not my heart that was. Well, it was my heart, but it was something. It was actually some object in the house.
Oh, sure.
That was broken. So
sure. And then a good question came in from Thomas, I believe it was, about some of the jerseys behind me, and talk about that. So I was going to talk about a couple real quick, and we'll do that too, because I get this question a lot. It just tweeted to me, like, what are some of the stories behind some of it? Because they all do have really interesting stories. So I'm going to grab a couple real quick for you guys.
Well, there's a lot of debate going on right now on social media from various teams, because some of them are trying to determine what their third jerseys are. Some have already come out with their third jerseys. Others haven't. I don't think Buffalo has, and I can attest from some of the previous incarnations of third Buffalo jerseys. I hope they don't go down that direction. They had a red jersey with big swords that was pretty bad.
Yeah, that was terrible.
They had a throwback jersey for the old Buffalo Bisons of the AHL with a Pepsi bottle cap as the emblem, which I thought was sort of it was. I mean, honestly, it's like the every time it's sort of like classic Coke. Every time the Sabres go away from their classic old jersey with the buffalo and the crossed sabers and the dark blue uniform and the white uniform, every time they go, it's a disaster. It's the decapitated goat's head. It's the garden slug. It's always bad. So just stick with what works.
Yeah. All right, so a couple things here. I have a couple signed jerseys that were actually sent to me by players. So that some of these are kind of cool. This one is one of them. It's signed by Mr. Lindros. This is when he was a Maple Leaf.
Yeah, for the whole 43 games, I think it was.
And this was a joke because I always told him he'd eventually play playing in Toronto. So I said, so when he went there, he's like, I got to send you a jersey.
I wish I said this on another podcast. I wish I had $1 for every time Howard Berger, our former compatriot on Hockey Buzz, had reported that Lindros was going to be traded to the Leafs from 1999 to like 2003, because if I had $1 for every time, I would be a billionaire.
Oh yeah, no question. I got another one here. So this is what I got to show you. This is maybe my favorite of all.
Well, while you're getting that out, Thomas Smith in the chat, Mike, do you think that the Lightning should have Bolts written on their third jersey? No, Bolts or Sens or like all these nickname jerseys are dumb. That Edmonton jersey with the rock with the oil in it was just dumb. I mean,
this is my favorite. This was I watched the 1980 Olympics, and I when if you remember that Team USA tied Team Sweden on a goal late against
Bill Baker.
Yeah, against Pelle Lindbergh, who at that time when I was watching on my little black and white TV, they're like, Pelle Lindbergh, who's a Flyers draft pick. So I was really excited about that. And he wore the Bernie Parent mask. I have a Pelle Lindbergh mask that I bought years ago. It's really cool. So I knew he was coming, so when training camp started, 1980, I was 12 years old. I went to the training camp with my mom, and I had, before the season even started, I found out through somebody I knew that he was going to be number 31 when the Flyers. So I went and I got a jersey made up, and I showed up at the first day of training camp with this like Lindbergh 31 jersey.
Wow.
And
that's the actual jersey.
It's the actual jersey that I bought then when I was 12. And yeah, so I showed up with this. He was like astonished. He's like, "Oh, that's amazing!" So because he was signing autographs, so that's incredible. And as he signed it, of course, it wore off because I wore this because I was so thrilled with everything that went on. Yes. I played in the Police Athletic League Street Hockey League as a goalie for the next 6 years. I wore this every game. So because that's what you do as a kid. That's why the Lindbergh thing is like ripped and torn off, because it's like this from street hockey. It's like the best condition it can be in at this point. But that's really something that means a lot.
Somebody says you should bring back the mask for Retro Fridays.
you know what? It's funny but you say that, because I did play in I wore the mask when I did the when I was still like completely anonymous. I went on in Nashville television with Pete Weber in the crowd, and I wore, because the way the press box is in Nashville, it's like in the crowd. So I was in the crowd and I wore the Pelle Lindbergh mask, and I did the interview through it. And JD, who was with the Blues at the time, was also up there, and to this day he still hates me for it. Anyway, just don't know. All right, so because I've never been able to get past that with JD, that I did that one time.
Last one, because we're running out of time here.
Last one. All right, I'm going to show you this one then, because this lasts really quickly. Here we go. This would be this is the Nashville Knights. Okay, so often you'll hear me mistakenly say Nashville Knights instead of Vegas Knights, because I was recording an album in Nashville in 1994, I want to say, when they had the last season. This is before the arena was built or anything like that. They were building the football stadium at the time. This was the last season of the Nashville Knights, and we went down and saw the last game that was ever played. And in that game, playing against the Nashville Knights was Ryan Sittler. That was like the only famous thing about that game. And they had win a jersey off of a guy's back thing. And I mean, there were 25 players, and there were probably like 400 people in the stands. I had a pretty good chance. And I won the jersey off of somebody's back. And I got this jersey. So this is the final game of the Nashville Knights. So there you go. Those are some of the jerseys. I have more. I'll show you, give more stories in the future. But I mean, since I was 5 years old, I think every Christmas, still to this day, my mother buys me a hockey jersey every year. So a lot of them have that to do too. A lot of them are just interesting. They've been bought back then. All right. Okay. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember, please, if you could, go to patreon.com/hockey and support the show. We really love doing the show, but it is getting hard to do financially at times. We're never going to charge for it, but if you get something out of it, if it means something to you during the day, we'd appreciate it. Even like $5 a month would be fantastic. Just throw it in there. If everybody did that, we would be in great shape. If you can do a little bit more, great. But think about what you pay for cable TV, and we try to give you, and we keep going through the summer when it's hard to find things to talk about. We'll still be here. So that's all. Patreon.com/hockey. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.